Hello, my name is Kevin Waldmuth, and I am a sixth grade English language arts teacher at Selbyville Middle School. And today I'm going to walk you through my game-based learning module for Innovations in Teaching at Wilmington University. This module was a lot less stressful than my coding module because I do incorporate game-based learning into my classroom right now. I do not typically use them as assessment prompts or formative checks. I use them more as a review before a summative or any quiz, or just to kind of motivate my students at the end of the period by telling them we'll play some Kahoot, or we can play some matching games on Quizlet at the end of the period. But I hadn't typically used it as kind of a formative check or an assessment prompt throughout learning. And I also had never used Nearpod before, which I'll get into in a couple minutes, but I do use Pear Deck. That is the premium platform that my district has chosen to use throughout this year. But I had never used Nearpod before, and I got into it, and there's some really cool stuff that you can do with it, and some things that I don't like about it as much as I like Pear Deck. But I'll show you guys all that stuff in a second. All right, so I chose to do some new content for this lesson instead of review. Last module with the coding, I chose to review some older content that we had already moved through, but this is a lesson that I've been meaning to get to, which is mood and tone. Um, we've had to cut some of our curriculum this year just to make it work with our shortened amount of time with our students. And this is something that I wanted to make sure I hit by the end of the year. And I thought that this module would be a great way to incorporate this lesson and get ready for it as it's upcoming. So here we go. So first things first, I took a look at some of the recommendations on our assignment Google Doc, and one of the recommendations was Nearpod, which I had never used before. So I went and checked it out. And when you go to Nearpod, this is what you see for the first time. I just did sign up for free. I used my school Google account that's given to me by our district. And I did not originally do any of the premium features. And from what I can tell, the premium feature does not offer you a whole lot additional versus the free account that you get when you sign up with Nearpod. Um, but what it does give you is the ability to use a Google add-on when you are in your Google Slides if you want to create it on here. So when you want to add something interactive, like right here, I gave my students an interactive question about whether they've ever noticed mood or tone when they're reading. Um, you just go to add-ons and Nearpod, open Nearpod. Much like Pear Deck, you can add interactive slides into your Google Slides while you're building it. But with Nearpod, when you're using this add-on, you must have the premium feature when you are editing in Google Slides and adding activities through that way. So I did sign up for just a 30-day trial, but this is really the only useful feature that's in premium, which I do really like. But if you want to, you can also you can import a Google slide into Nearpod's website, and then you can add the activities there, and you can do that for free. Okay, so this is what I based my whole lesson off of, is the Nearpod platform. So now I'm going to switch over to what that looks like after you launch your Google Slides, after you've completed them. So you launch it through Nearpod's website, and it gives the students a code. And at the beginning of your lesson or your presentation, you give them this code. You can also do it student paced. I chose to do teacher paced for this one. But if you want your students to be able to flick through the slides at their own time, or if you wanted to post this to Schoology as an interactive activity that didn't take teacher guidance, and you wanted to make it more of a or a self-directed learning activity, you could do that too. So this is the presentation, so mood and tone. I go over my essential question: how do authors use mood and tone in their writing? And on this tab, I have joined as a student. So anytime that I switch back and forth slides from my master copy, which is the tab that I was just on, their slides change as well. So this is all they see while you're going through. They can't move back and forth unless you have that student paste feature on. So my essential question for this lesson is, how do authors use tone and mood in their writing? And right now, I introduced a little activity for my students to do. It's a short answer, just activating strategy. What do you already know about tone and mood when writing? Because this is a standard that's kind of scaffolded among elementary schools standards. So as they move through, this is something that they should have already been introduced to some extent. But when you go to what the students see for this slide, is they have their question right there, they write it, and then they go ahead and submit it. So a lot like Pear Deck, if you've ever used Pear Deck before, it's pretty cool. So I'm going to keep going here. Then I give them the dictionary definitions of the vocabulary I want them to know. And the vocabulary is a huge piece of this because a lot of the game-based activities that I embedded into this lesson is practicing vocabulary or just getting to know this. If you know English language arts, a lot of the content is centered around some of these text feature vocabularies. So my vocabulary for this lesson are tone, mood, and then imagery, word choice, adjective, and connotation. Okay, so here's where I also embedded a Quizlet activity for my students. Quizlet is not something that's new for my students. I typically, whenever I introduce a new vocabulary list, I will make a Quizlet list for it. And then we have work from home days on Wednesdays where it's asynchronous work for our students. So I will just give them an activity as one of the things they need to do for my class, like 10 to 15 minutes on Quizlet. And when you go to Quizlet, you can click, I have this embedded into my presentation. Click there. So if you haven't ever used Quizlet before, it's really cool and it's super easy to use. So here's my list. And it's just a 6-word list of those words that I showed you. So if you're creating a new list, I already have a couple of different sets made in here. But if you are creating a new list, you sign in with your Google account, or you can make your own account based on other platforms. And you come up and you can do create, study set, and it's super easy. You just add your word and then your definition, and it'll give you, like, say your word is tone. It will give you a whole lot of academic definitions that you might want to use. I find a lot of good definitions on there when I'm creating a new list, and then you just can add your title at the top. So it's a super easy platform to use. I really like it. And when the kids come in to their list, so this is our mood/tone set. They can just practice simple flashcards where you click and they can flip them and practice that way. They can do a cool feature called Learn, where it just takes them through a bunch of different scaffolding activities, how they learn. And one that my students really, really like is this match. So you start a game and you match these with their words. It times you. And if they're logged in, it'll take their username and it'll put them on a leaderboard for their times. And this really incorporates a lot of that game-based learning pedagogy where they're really engaged and they're competing against one another. And it's just a really cool way to get them involved with learning their words. And it definitely helps because when I see my students who are really spending time on this match game and practicing and really trying to beat their times. And then that shows when they are taking a quiz or a summative or anytime I ask about the meaning of any vocabulary words that we've been practicing. So Quizlet is a powerful tool, and it is something that throughout this lesson I will have my students referencing on their work from home days where they are practicing these words, and then we practice it, how well they know them at the end. But in my presentation, I include that quick link for them to jump in and practice maybe for a couple minutes before we move on. Okay, so here's where I introduce tone, and we just read a couple passages, and I try to get them to really understand the definition of tone, and that is what the author's attitude is towards the subject versus mood, where it's the atmosphere that the author develops, because that's a pretty big determination between those two words. Okay, so they read a passage, and then I have another interactive activity where they actually draw on this. They highlight any imagery or any words that the author uses to develop his attitude towards this teacher or this student, and this is what the students see then. They have these tools, and then they can highlight or underline any important words there, and then they just hit submit. So one difference between Nearpod and Pear Deck is Pear Deck is like live time, so anything they're doing I can see. It looks like this is more of a submission based, so you might not be able to get any of that real time feedback until they submit. So let's go back here. And then I just introduced some polls, just kind of talking about how the author felt about the teacher and then the student. And the polls are integrated through Pear Deck as well, or not Pear Deck, Nearpod. There are activities that are introduced through there. Okay, then we practice through another passage, and the students highlight and underline any words that develop tone there. And then just wait for this to load. And then we do a game called Time to Climb, which is something that really stood out as soon as I started looking at the different activities that you could plan through Nearpod. So Time to Climb is a game where the students compete with each other, and they say who can climb the hill the fastest by answering questions. And I based this on a formative review. You could do this with anything, any multiple choice question that you want to do, true or false, anything where you can give them a couple questions and then they compete with each other and they try to climb to the top of the hill. So we can check that out real quick. So when you do Time to Climb, you can choose any of these backgrounds. So let's say I wanted to do this space background, continue. And then here's what my students see when I hit start. So the students get to choose their own character, which is really cool too. So they can customize their character, and this really gets them involved. I haven't gotten a chance to test this with my students yet, but I know anytime that they can customize an avatar, they're in right away. So then whenever you go start, then it says waiting for players. I'm the only person connected to this right now, so I'm going to start it so I can show you guys what that looks like. So hit start. And then on the student side, what is the definition of tone? They make that choice. And then their names climb. So I would typically include their names in this, but if you feel like your students will feel uncomfortable with their names being up there, say you have students who might not be doing as well with the content or are falling behind a little bit, or maybe they missed a day and you don't want to put them on the spot with them being a little bit behind the rest of the class, you can hide students' names. So then when you show the leaderboard or when they see themselves climbing, those names won't be there they'll see their names, but they won't see others, which is pretty cool. So I like that. A Pear Deck offers a lot of stuff like that too. Okay. Then I go through some mood passages, and we have some interactive activities with that as well, where they read some passages and identify vocabulary that develops the atmosphere of what they're reading. And again, this is a lot of exploration with Nearpod for me. That's what a lot of this lesson came down to. Was I use Pear Deck a lot, but now I'm kind of figuring out that Nearpod is something that you can incorporate games, because that's something that Pear Deck does not offer. And this Time to Climb game is really cool. So let's try another background. Let's try the underwater background for this game for mood. And I did find the mood game from already loaded Nearpod games. So when you're in your Google slide and you want to do a time to climb, and also these are all the activities that Nearpod has to offer if you want to introduce these into any of your slides. But when you create a time to climb activity within your Google slide, or you can do it on Nearpod's website, click time to climb, and you can create your own questions, which is what I did for the first one, or which I did for mood. You can search really anything. You can look through some of these different content areas, or what I did was I just searched mood, and then analyzing mood came up, and it says it's for ninth and 12th grade, but then when I looked at the content, it was easy enough for my students to do. And you can also, if you select that, you can edit what they have too. So you can make this your own and make it so it's easy to differentiate if your students aren't on the level that it was designed for, which I think is awesome. So let's go back real quick. So then this offers the underwater background too for this activity. So continue, and then again they get to customize a new character. It's got some cool audio there. Start, and then you start it up on your side as the teachers, and then again. So they read a passage, and then they choose what the mood would be. So it's a really cool way for the students to compete with each other. Okay. And last but not least, I did incorporate a Kahoot activity. I've been working with Kahoot since I was in college for my undergrad. Really, really motivating tool for my students. Every time they hear Kahoot, they go crazy. They're all super into it. A lot of them have been doing Kahoot since they were in kindergarten, but I do have some students who haven't played it before this year, and they all love it, and it never gets old for them. They're always so into it. So I did make a custom Kahoot for this activity, and I linked the image in my presentation. And what I did with this is I just had my students practice their activities or their vocabulary for this lesson because it's so important for mood and tone. Um, so I just did a quick vocabulary check with Kahoot, and the students compete with each other, and they love it. I usually give them a prize to the top three at the end of the period. And one thing that is really cool about Kahoot is that it works so well with kids who are both hybrid or in person and remote. They can play seamlessly together, and it works really well for the environment that we're teaching in right now. Oh, so the end product of my lesson is for my students to write a short creative story or write about a nonfiction personal experience of theirs, where they work to develop tone and mood as the author. They have to include character setting, dialogue, descriptive language, word choice, imagery, and then they're going to complete that writing piece on a Google document and submit that to Schoology. I do a lot of writing in my classroom, so this is something that doesn't really need a whole lot of explaining to my students, but it'll be cool to see how well the games that I've incorporated in my lesson with the time to climb activity through Nearpod, some of the engaging activities that Nearpod has to offer, and the Quizlet mixed in with the Kahoot activity at the end. So I hope to engage my students with this game-based learning lesson, and overall, I hope to see that it has a positive impact on their product at the end. Okay, thank you everybody. Have a great week, and thank you for watching my presentation.